So this would be a good point to say, good morning, David. We're going to now hand over to you and learn all about you and what you do. And I think we're going to learn how to future-proof ourselves. So I'm looking forward to that. How would you prefer to do it? Do you want to just run with it, or do you want to have a conversation? Or
yeah, so what I'll do a little presentation. If I could just share my screen and a few slides, and just to get us to think about, and I think this is a good time of year to have a bit of reflection about what we've done over the last 12 months and start planning for the next 12 months. And I'm going to really sort of focus on one part of future-proofing ourselves, and that is the art of reflection. You know, as we've all said, you know, been very busy, you know, flying here, there and everywhere. When do we actually sort of get off and put the devices down and sort of create some thinking time and think, yeah, where we're going with this? So I'll share my screen and do a bit of an introduction, and then I've got some quite good questions. Well, I think they're good questions to ask everybody, just to generate a bit of conversation actually and share each other's ideas on the subject.
Perfect, go for it, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to come and present, much appreciated. And let me just bring that up. So this is me, David Yeabsley. Most of my work actually is management training with all sorts of organisations around the country, but I'm not going to talk to you about that. I'm going to talk to you about one of my favourite subjects, which is sort of linked into that, and that's about future-proofing ourselves, about if you don't look after yourself, who's going to do it for you? This type of talk is normally delivered in businesses. People have been doing the same job for many years. You need a bit of a big wet fish to whack them around the head and tell them to wake up and realise that technology is moving quickly, and if they stand still for too long, they could have an issue. So where did I come up? How did I come up with this idea? Well, I'm an author of a book called Futureproof Yourself, and I do run a YouTube channel on it as well. Send out my videos once a week, or someone else helps me to do that anyway, who's actually on the call. So that's Sheila, so thanks for your help on that. And I also do a little bit of coaching, but not huge amounts. Most of my work is on the management side, but this is one of my big passions, and I'm going to tell you why it is, and take you on a little journey, and then get you to think about your journeys and where you're going with your future proofing. So why future proofing? Well, it actually goes back to 1982, which does seem an awful long time ago, when I was at school in a place called Holmer Green near High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. And, you know, like most sort of 15, 16-year-olds that, you know, I love sport, you know, actually I love school. We had such good fun. You know, school was never a chore, it was just good fun. We didn't learn anything, we just had lots of fun, which I always thought was quite a good idea. But my sort of life changed one afternoon, sort of in June, walking home from school after doing my GCSEs. And I was walking home from school one afternoon with my friends, and we walked down our road towards my house, and I noticed my father's car was parked in the driveway. And I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. What's my dad doing at home at sort of 4:30? And I said goodbye to my friends, and I went into the house, and the house was very quiet. My dad was sat in his chair, and he was crying. And I'd never seen my dad cry before. Dads don't cry, you know, dads are always there for us, and, you know, dads are, you know, aren't vulnerable, you know, they're invincible. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, they don't need me anymore. And of course I said, well, what do you mean they don't need you anymore? Everyone needs my dad, you know, everyone needs dads. And he says, no, I've been made redundant. And he was a very clever guy. He worked in the production of precious metals, which he'd been doing for many, many years. And this really hit me. And I didn't realise it hit me at the time, but it hit me later on in life. And unfortunately, he hit ill health and very difficult time of it all and everything else. But as I left school that year, I went to work for a big life assurance company where I saw lots of my dads. People have been there for many years doing the same thing. And I then sort of started to think, well, I don't want this to happen to me. And I sort of enjoyed working there in this insurance company. I was responsible for writing financial planning reports. helping make provision for inheritance tax and capital gains tax and funding for school fees and other things with investments. And my manager gave me a bit of feedback on one of my appraisals, and it sort of went a bit like this. David, we like having you in the office. You're good fun to have around. I liked a bit of a joke and a laugh. Let's say your work is of a satisfactory nature, but you must be the biggest pain up the arse I've ever had to manage. Please let me find you another job. And that's just, took me on a bit of a route trying to find out what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do with my career. And going back to my school days, I was pretty useless at school. I walked out with my one qualification. I think it was a B in maths. Didn't really get academia, still don't in some respects. But what I found I was very good at is learning from my experiences. And that's how I've based my career now. So I didn't realise about future-proofing until several years later, that it was like you guys all made that step out of the corporate world and out of the business world into our own companies. Why? I expect like me, because I can take control of it. I feel I've got more control now than I ever had working for someone else, and that was over 20 odd years ago. So what now? Well, I think it's then starting to think about our future-proofing journey. I like to think that we're all a limited company, which some of us are, and also people who work in companies. We're all a limited company. We sell our time, our knowledge, our experience, great wisdom and bundles of enthusiasm. And in return, people who work in the corporate world get a salary and other benefits. And obviously, if we work for ourselves, it's a smaller version of that. But how are we going to stay relevant and value for the rest of our working careers? I mean, when will we be able to retire? That's if we want to, because obviously I'm sure that we all love what we do. But it's then starting to think about, how are we going to stay relevant and value? And I had a conversation with my son about this when I dropped him off at his first day of his graduate programme in Milton Keynes a few years ago. As he got out the car, I said, Matt, welcome to the next 55 years of your life. I won't tell you how we applied. And I now do that as an introduction to an induction program for one of my clients that I try and do a couple of these each year, mainly because I want to understand how the younger generation view the working environment and coming into the working world, and plus they're going to be my customers in the next few years. So we're all a limited company, but we can't do this on our own. We've got to think about how we're staying relevant and value and upskilling ourselves, because obviously, as we all know, there's been rather a lot of change in the last few years. And guess what? I dare say in the next few years, there's going to be a lot of change. And this is going to be or based around some of the questions that I'm going to ask ourselves a bit later on. But just as a bit of reflection, have we ever done any of the following? And I'm sure we have, because there's people on this call that sort of help people do these things. But, have you ever decided to eat well, or even decided to go on a diet or get some help on that? I'm sure we all have, and especially sort of with Christmas coming up. Have we ever decided to go to the gym, go running, walking or fitness classes, or in my case, get on my bicycle and go for a little cycle? Have we ever decided to do a complete spring clean and clear things out, get some financial advice, clear out old clothes? But how often have we invested in our self-development in terms of our learning? And this is really quite important in all aspects, whether we're running our own business or working in the corporate organisations. I mean, who's responsible for our personal development?
We are.
Yeah, but how much time do we give it? And do we invest in it well enough? And that's really quite important to think about, because, we perhaps invest in new cars and holidays and pensions and property, but I think it's fair to say that we need to invest in ourselves. We are our own biggest asset, and especially if we run our own organisations. So what are we doing to keep ourselves relevant and value and future-proof ourselves? Because I think it's fair to say that it's tough out there. We're being sold by the BBC and Sky News and any other media organisation that wants to sort of happily say that there's a recession on and we're entering in recession. But times are perhaps a little bit tough, but I think as long as we've always got a plan, We're always incredibly organised, have the ability to self-motivate ourselves. I like this one, thinking differently. And this is something I'm always challenging myself. Think differently. I know how David thinks, that's great, but how do other people think? How do other people see things? So it's like, yeah, when we talk to people, do we, keep quiet and just listen and ask them so we can learn from them? Obviously, we've got to work very hard to make it happen. And one of my key things is, I'll only ever focus on what I can control on. Sorry, I focus what I can control. So I think these are real essence of future-proofing ourselves. And what we're trying to do this morning is just create a bit of that reflection time. But to help us out, I'd just like to sort of have a think. Does anybody know who this is?
It's not you, David.
I wish. I never had hair that good.
Looks familiar, but I can't picture it. I can't put a name to it.
His name is Stephen Sasson. And in 1978, he invented this. Any ideas?
Video camera?
Close. It was close. It was the first prototype for a digital camera. Because prior to that, I mean, he did work for Kodak, but prior to that, we all used to have what we call Kodak Instamatic cameras. Now, try explaining this to the younger generation coming into the working environment. So when we went on holiday, we used to put a piece of plastic in this piece of plastic. Let me just stop the share for a minute. We used to put the piece of plastic in this piece of plastic, close it up, go on holiday. We didn't do too many of the pouting lips and the selfies, and does my bottom look big in this? But the crazy thing is that when we came back from our holidays, we used to have to take the plastic out of the plastic, put it in an envelope with a check, if anybody can remember what a checkbook is, for 49p, and put it in a post box, if anybody knows what a post box is anymore, and wait for 2 weeks for our photos to turn up. Now, the thing is with Kodak, at that time, they were perhaps one of the world's greatest brands. Everybody had a Kodak Instamatic camera. But what happened to Kodak? They didn't embrace it. They said it would put us out of business. Well, it did, because they didn't embrace it. And it's a bit like sort of as we see people at work who don't keep themselves up to date. And we all run our small little organisations. I don't want to end up like Kodak. And it got me thinking about other organisations that used to be great but are no longer. Anybody got any good examples of companies that we used to use a lot but no longer?
Nokia.
Yeah.
Nokia's a big one for me.
What didn't Nokia do?
Keep up with iPhones, make a smartphone that's actually usable.
Yeah.
Blockbuster.
Any others? Blockbuster. How did Blockbuster make most of their money?
From video DVDs and stuff.
Late fees.
They missed it.
Sorry, say that again. James, say that again.
I used to work in Blockbusters and I know it was late fees.
Yeah. Because if anybody had children around that time, they'd all promise you that on a Friday night when you used to take them down there, I'll promise to take the videos back. And then the following Tuesday or Wednesday, you used to see the DVDs stuffed down the back of the settee. And guess who had to pay the late fees? But obviously they had the opportunity to digitalise their films, and obviously another organisation took over instead. Anybody else?
Nevica.
Oh, good. Talk us about them.
Well, I come from the rag trade. So Nevica was a mega ski brand back in the 80s and 90s who kind of dropped the ball because they had a fantastic image, but they didn't sponsor, they didn't develop, they went cheaper and disappeared because other people did it better.
Excellent. Okay, that's nice. I'm going to throw in a couple of others. Woolworths, which perhaps you could argue should have become Amazon, and perhaps Yellow Pages could have become Google. I know they sort of had a bit of a go at it, but it's just to think about, what are we doing to keep ourselves up to date in terms of technologies, ways of thinking, working practices, and all the other areas that I dare say, support others on. because I'm sure we're all very good at giving other people advice. I know I am, I get paid for it. But that's perhaps where we need to go and look in the mirror and then start to think, am I listening to my own advice in terms of keeping myself relevant and value for the rest of my working career? So let me just go back to my slides. Where is it? There we go. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
No, it's frozen on me. Oh, there we are. So what I'd like us to think about is, what about us? How are we going to stay relevant and of value? So I'm going to pick three quicker ideas to look at. The first one is always be learning. And as I said, when we're networking, network for two reasons. One is to get new business, and the other reason I network is to learn. And that is my two areas. That's the way I think about it. I'm either networking like I was doing. I was making a few phone calls before we came on here to people I need to beat up and chase. So I'm always constantly doing that. And today, working with you guys, and then this evening I've got another networking event. I always need to be learning from others, because obviously I haven't got all the ideas. I like to think I have, but I haven't. I always need to be thinking the future. So what's next? And I think this is a really important thing to do this time of year. I normally do it this time of year and also in the summer, and think, okay, where am I really going with this? So what next? So what next? I'm constantly asking myself this question. And also, that networking. Who can help you and who can you help? And as I said, I think it's really quite important when people do ask you advice, and those that mention that you're mentors, which is a great opportunity to go and give other people advice. But then, as I said, it's then thinking, but am I listening to my own advice? It's a great reflection technique. So the first two questions I want to ask us are, what have you learned about yourself recently? So let's take this year. I don't want you to sort of say, well, achieved these targets, made this amount of money, and I've been really successful at doing that. That's great, and that's good stuff. But what have you actually learned about yourself as a person, as a business person, or just as a, you in this world? And also, what's gone well? And I think that's really quite important as well. So I'm going to stop the share and just think about those two questions. The first one, what have you learned about yourself? How easy or difficult is it to answer that question? Can anybody answer it straight off?
I'll start. I've learned. No, ladies first. Katie, after you.
Well, without giving too much of my personal life away, I have a difficult mother, and just this year, like I never knew what I knew about that I am my mother's daughter, but this year I have been able to actually kind of see outside of myself and see some of my we'll call them my unconscious programs. I've been really aware of them this year. Like, they stand out to me incredibly like beacons this year, and I've been able to really move out of them, which is really good.
Does that mean you're realizing that you're more like your mother than you'd like to be?
No, it's realizing what behaviors I have based on how she raised me. We grew up in a kind of a scary environment. Do you want to leave it just at that? And the knock-on effect of how I view people, like how I react to some things.
Got you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Andy, you were going to share?
Yeah, I've learned that I'm not as patient with child number 5 as I was with child number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Luckily, she's 18 now, and I've learned that I don't want to do it again.
Okay.
No, not that I don't want to do it again, but I don't have the capacity to do it the same the 5th time round as I did the 1st time round, which is, it's quite an eye-opener for me, because I like to think of myself as fairly indestructible, the reliable, solid one who can just pick up anything, but I can't. I can't take 5 kids through their entire lives with the same level of intensity.
Yeah. Okay. And what about the rest of us? So 2 of us have sort of said, yep, straight away. The rest of us, have we found that question perhaps a little bit more difficult to think about or answer?
Yes. I think it comes. Oh, sorry, Chris, go.
No. I suppose, I mean, I'm sort of thinking on what have I learned, and it's not something that comes immediately to mind, but I think one of the things I've learned maybe about myself is that in terms of accepting people saying that you're good at something, I'm very good at saying but no, and putting a negative slant on a lot of things, which is a bad thing, I guess. But
because if you can't wave your flag, who's going to do it for you?
Yeah, no, exactly. So I guess I'm learning a little bit more about how to wave my flag and say that yes, and accepting those, those positives.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got one where I think this year more than ever I've become used to being more introvert, and what I mean by that is not partying, not having as much of a laugh as I used to probably be pre-COVID. I guess that comes with getting older. But the other thing is sometimes doing this year particularly, doing more for people than they do for you. And I mean that in a way where you don't give to receive. I'm not that kind of person.
Yeah.
But you realize that there's other people who are, or organizations, more to the point, I shouldn't say individuals, organizations who are more self-serving than they are in terms of helping.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else got anything they're willing to share?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So I suppose the last 6 weeks, I've been working with a new business partner in setting up the golf business, and she is very different to me. She's a very straight talking Australian, and there have been quite a few moments where I've been like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. And just that sort of ability to adapt to somebody else's feedback style, and really sort of embrace it, and then start to think about, well, so how do I use that to best effect within the activities that she's doing, the thinking that she's doing. And it's also made me reflect on some of the qualities that perhaps I have that I didn't appreciate so much before. So yes. Really, I suppose what it's taught me is play to your strengths.
Totally agree. Yeah. That's a really good point. We spend too much time in our lives worrying about what we're not good at instead of enjoying and maximising what we are good at. So I think that's a really good point. Anybody else got any they're happy to share?
I have. This was mentioned by someone last night as well. I haven't been very good at shouting out my own skills, the positive sides of what I do. I tend to, even though I'm posting about it, I tend to hide under a bushel a bit. And when I ask other people what they think about what I'm doing, or the skills and the positive things that I bring, it's quite obvious. So even though I'm not feeling that confident or that comfortable with shouting about myself yet, I'm recognizing the fact that I need to appreciate Sheila a bit more.
Oh, a great idea. What a great idea. Okay. Good stuff. So all I would encourage you to do, perhaps over the Christmas time and New Year, perhaps you've got a little bit of downtime, hopefully, just to recharge the batteries, do spend some time thinking, okay, so what have I learned about myself? Have I been outside my comfort zone? What challenges have I been faced with? Even perhaps you've been dealt a difficult hand in life. Okay, you've been dealt a difficult hand, but you actually managed it really well. And sometimes we should be proud of ourselves of this. And this is a great way of developing our self-esteem and developing our confidence and dealing with a lovely word called imposter syndrome, which I'm sure we all get on the odd occasion. I know I do. And when I'm standing up in front of people and thinking, my goodness, I'm the least qualified person in the room, but I'm the best person to be delivering this session or conference or whatever it is that I'm doing that day. So it's a good way of developing. And also, if we are coming into a bit of a tough time, what's gone well? And actually analysing what's gone well and how did it happen? And analysing, there again, what are you good at? I just refer back to, at the moment, 2008, 2009 with the financial crash. I was running my business then, but I came out of it really well because I just sat down and thought, right, do not talk to anybody else who runs a business like you, because all they're full of is doom and gloom and the government should do this and it's not fair that all the finance directors have pulled the plug on training and coaching and all of those things. I just decided to talk to more people because that's something I can control. And that went really well. And that's one of my philosophies of running my business. And also, yeah, what's gone well this year? You know, like I dare say for most of us, it's been a challenge, but if things have gone well and we've done well, what's been our magic secret? I think it's really important to capture it and then take that into next year, because sometimes there could be a downturn, there could be, I don't know, clients decide to make other decisions. And I then think, okay, so what's made me successful so far? And I sort of, yeah, don't think we always reflect on this, what's made us good. So I think they're two really important questions to ask ourselves and create that thinking time. If you're bad with your digital devices, just learn to turn them off, have a cup of tea, look out the window with a notebook and just think, okay, what's gone well and what have I learned about myself? It's a great reflection tool. And then it's a great way of developing ourselves and reminding ourselves. So that's the first sort of set of questions I wanted us to think about. The next part is then sort of really sort of about moving forward then. Well, this will work. Is, yeah, the future, so what next? And I think it really is quite important. What will your job and business look like in the next few years? Or perhaps the next 6 months? I think a really good example of this is the car industry or the motor industry. The transformation in the motor industry and what we're now driving compared to what we were driving 3 years ago is absolutely extraordinary. But for a lot of businesses, they're still going through huge amounts of change. And I think it's really important that people sort of say, yeah, I really enjoy what I do, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, that's great. But what's coming? What's coming up in the future that I need to be aware of? What new skills and experiences will I need? Sometimes just to stand still, but obviously we like to progress and develop. So I think it's there again in then thinking, and perhaps we can just have a quick discussion as a group here. You know, what is changing? Yeah, what's changing our own particular area, and are we networking with enough people who are perhaps a good authority in our business, not necessarily just to win business off them, but just to see how they see things. I quite like doing this when I go into companies and then saying to them, okay, so you know things are going well. What's the next 6 months, year going to look like? What will your business look like? And it gets people thinking, and they come out of all sorts of amazing comments. I think, oh, I better make a note of that. I haven't really thought of it that way. And it's a great way to sort of learn from other people with these questions. So, yeah, and I think it's professional responsibility. Just going back to what one of us said is being able to talk positively about ourselves and the value that we can bring our clients in moving forward. But the question I really wanted to ask is, yeah, what is our businesses and how we operate? Is that going to change in the next few years? What are the big challenges? What do we need to learn more of? What new experiences, what new skills do we need? Any thoughts on that?
So in our business, there's a few short-term and longer-term trends. I don't, you know, longer term being a year or two. There's the reversal of the change that happened in March 2020. So rather than everyone dispersing now and working from home and the challenges that brought, not just from an IT perspective, but organizational perspective from companies, they're now migrating back towards the center in some shape or form. Not everybody, but recognizing that a significant number are, is driving a change in our thinking again.
Yeah.
It's not about the technology as such, it's more about the messaging and how we make sure people still know about us and we're still relevant in their new environments.
Yeah.
And then the other one is the challenge that's always, I'll say always, it's been there for the last 10 years, in that the need for security is, you know, increasing dramatically year after year after year, but the acceptance of spending money to be more secure hasn't really or is changing at a far slower pace.
Right.
So the challenge, the biggest challenge, is to convey to people just what a risk the cybersecurity is now,
Yeah.
and just how important it is to allocate some money to prevent it, not deal with it after it's happened, because that can be catastrophic, but to prevent it from happening. So those are the two sort of shorter term things that are actually the first one is a reversal of something we had to do. The second one is an ongoing challenge that's becoming more and more relevant for people.
Yeah. Okay, that's nice. Good. Anybody else? What's it going to look like in the future?
Hi. So I attended a Women in Golf Awards event last week, and as part of it, they showed a film that's just been released on Sky Golf about the challenges for women in a historically male-dominated sort of environment and pastime. And one of the things that came out of the conversation was the fact that it is referred to as ladies golf, and is that language a barrier to particularly to younger people or people from different social classes for accessing sport. And I'm sitting there thinking, crikey, I've just branded my company Ladies Golf Tour. But that's because that is the language you associate with golfing events, because it's the LPGA and it's the language of the big bodies. But they said, you don't talk about ladies football and ladies rugby, it's women. And it's not ladies and gentlemen, it's ladies and men's side. So it's, one of the people said, the only time you ever see ladies written is on the toilets. in any other sort of walk of life. So it was just interesting to hear how the language is moving on.
It's really interesting.
How perhaps there is a changing expectation in terms of branding, and is that an access or a potential barrier for us as a business longer term?
Wow. Yeah. I'd never thought of that. I mean, and also different terminologies in all parts of our working environments. I sometimes fall foul of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong way, maybe through being ignorant. And you have to be careful of those. So that's important as well.
Yeah, it just led to a really interesting debate, both in the room but also subsequently on social media. And I think the upshot is that it doesn't really matter what you're called, as long as the accessibility and the equal opportunity is there.
Yeah.
Almost the language is one aspect, but it's not the main barrier, certainly.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay,
I think the good thing about language though now is that rather than saying it's women's football, we're also saying men's football now as well. So we're adding gender to both sides of the argument. So it's not just football and women's football, it's men's football and women's football, which I think helps in the other way around, because it's gendering the sport into the two sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think we almost without fail come around to this being mentioned every time we meet, but it also depends on your target audience, because I know from what you've said previously, Kaya, that your mainstay audience is middle-aged women who play golf, which typically would mean, to me at least, that they like to think of themselves as ladies. Yeah. In which case, you're probably not doing a bad thing for your current group of clients. It's what impact it has on the next loads coming through as to whether the messaging for them needs to be different.
Exactly. Yeah. If I was going to expand the tour and try and target, maybe more elite golfers who tend to be younger and playing at the sort of county level, I might have to think about rebranding.
Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else challenges that they feel that we need to sort of wake up and change what we're doing or be more mindful of? Even perhaps how we access our client base. You know, sometimes we fall into the trap of just thinking, oh, just a few posts on social media, I've done my sales and marketing for the week. Or, you know, are there different ways that we need to try and communicate with our potential customers and clients?
I think the landscape at the moment with things like a certain character in America buying Twitter is definitely changing the way people think about marketing and social media. Definitely. I think there's legislation going through various governments that also change, for example, what I do with websites, potentially what Andy does with his stuff in terms of security. So, you know, that they're two things that I've always got my eye on, is things like privacy legislations, security, encryption, how things are going, because they will have potentially big impacts on what I do, what Andy does. You know, if they banned end-to-end encryption, you know, that's the online world starts to collapse because we don't have online banking anymore.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
I think it's interesting the way the big corporations are, and it's all been forecasted, you know, previously, are buying up the smaller ones, becoming more powerful, and even now on the same footing as governments and global organizations. You know, when you have some of the top internet company leaders sitting in front of a whole load of federal politicians answering questions about why they're doing this and why they're doing that, almost with the same power as a country, I think it shows that there's a bigger divide that's now emerging between the smaller, and in my case, I think smaller is better because it's more strategic, more flexible, more progressive, and the bigger ones which try to inhibit that and control it more.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So please have more of these conversations. What next? What's it going to look like? How's it going to work? What's my contribution towards it? How am I positioning myself? Not just, you know, as I said, the physical work that we do, but also for us, we'll run our own small businesses. What are the best ways of engaging with people? Will it all just continue to be social media? I still go back to the old traditional ways of sometimes sending people for stuff, and because I know that they're going to open it, I know they're going to read those things. Instead of doing Christmas cards this year, which I've always done, I'm doing New Year's cards, and I'm sending them a couple of books with it. Not my books, mine, but some other people's books. And I just thought, yeah, I'll try something different, just to try and engage people with a different way of, you know, communication. So always be, you know, swapping ideas and asking each other when you are networking those questions, but ask yourselves, is this something I need to be very mindful of and got to wake up and realize that I've got to develop in certain areas? So that was the second lot of questions. The last ones, just to finish us off, is, let's give it a second and it'll play game. Go on. Doesn't want to.
It'll come.
There we are. Okay. Think about the people of wisdom that are surrounding us. There again, do we have enough of these conversations? You know, giving advice and mentoring others. Think about your clients, suppliers, internal and external people. If you've got a small business and you've got internal and external people, do you maximize these relationships in getting advice from people? Who can help you? Who can get you to think differently? Who can change or give you a different perspective on how things work? I'm always trying to source these types of people. because they make me think differently. And I see that as one of my key tasks to helping me be successful is, constantly have that ability to think differently and look at things from a different perspective. So I need to talk to people who are going to make me think differently. And as I say, and I think we can find these in places that we don't always realise. And perhaps I'm really going out of my way to go and see people and have meetings rather than doing them online, because you get just that better conversation. And also you end up bumping into other people when you're doing them to the offices, but normally you've got to pick a Wednesday or Thursday because the rest of the week no one's in there. Am I maximising those relationships in finding out how they see things and what challenges they're faced with? And it just makes us more clever, as I say it, that if I can learn from others. And as I've said at the start, if you are mentoring, if you are giving advice, just make sure at the end of it, you just stop and go, oh, you were good today, but are you listening to yourself? And I think that's really quite important. So just start to think about, in our reflection, who else do we need to be speaking to? So is there anybody, and we'll just stop the share, is there anybody that perhaps we need to put on our lists for next year, early next year, or even perhaps in the next week or so? Need to catch up and just ask them some great questions for them to give us some great opinions, because normally if you do ask people great questions, they actually think you're really interesting, but you're not doing any talking, you're just doing the listening. So is there anybody that you would you would love 5 or 10 minutes with in the next, perhaps in January time? Someone you can think, well, I'd love to pick their brains on how they see the world.
I think there's one that you mentioned earlier, David, was, how can I put it? It's reaching out and talking to people who are maybe still in the corporate world, because that's one thing I talk about, having vast corporate experience and everything else. But I haven't been in the corporate world for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Whereas there are friends of mine who are quite high up in places like Google, and it'd be worth just taking them out for lunch and going, so what does it look like now then?
Brilliant.
How does it trickle down? What are you seeing?
Yeah.
And when you said, or you referred to something like that earlier on, I was just thinking, I'm going to take Rich out for lunch. One of my mates is a guy at Google. Yeah. So
why not?
Yeah.
All that, I call it, okay, perhaps you're paying for lunch, but unless they've got a nice company restaurant that you can go into, but I call it free learning.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't actually call it networking. I call it free learning. And I've just got to shut up, ask them some great questions, and wow, get some free learning. So that's a great one. Anybody else got anybody on their list, or should have that on their list?
I do. Because I'm working full time now, and I am in a very fortunate position that the CEO really likes me, and we get chatty. We've already been out to lunch. He took me and my person above me, but he just thinks, I don't know what he thinks. He'd be always saying, you're so unusual, you're so wonderful, And the other day, because I keep thinking, my problem is I have never had a business, and he's extremely successful in not only running this business, but other businesses that he's had. So I'm going to start taking advantage of that and start picking his brains about running businesses and see what I can learn.
And those people are so approachable. Those people you always say about it, I can remember it being coached or mentored in big organizations. And one mentor of mine said, why don't you go and have a chat with the CEO? I said, what? He said, well, he's a friendly guy. Go and have a chat. See if he can make time for you in his diary. And it became every Friday, the CEO of Europe, I'd go in there, we'd have a coffee, have a chat. I'd help him with his diabetes. And he'd tell me about how to build an organization.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's quite flattering as well, isn't it? I've reached out to quite a few people now saying, they're senior leaders, whatever, trying to get into their organization. So can I pick your brain? You're obviously doing this at the moment. I'd really like to learn more about it. Would you be happy to give me a few minutes? And actually it's worked really well, because it's a compliment to them, isn't it?
Yeah. And they nearly always say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not selling, you're asking.
Yeah.
I've been connecting with everybody at work on LinkedIn, so they all know what I do outside of what I do at work.
Perfect.
And so now I'm getting people asking me about, you know, they're always asking me for advice on food and diet and everything. So in the new year, when I'll start running workshops, and I'll be able to invite them all over to come join. So it's like my own private network group there, really, because there's 130 people in the office, but they've got 4,000 staff across Australia.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
I think I just need to get out more in general and see my existing clients. I mean, I went for last week. We had a Christmas do with I guess the guy that gives me his company gives us the most work, and his client is a massive med tech company which have just been bought out and swallowed another company, which is, but that was the second time I've actually met him in person. And we still get on really well. Like, and we're talking daily when we are working together. But it's just, I suppose it's that face to face for me is still something I don't do a lot of. And well, if I'm doing branding, I obviously see clients and
yeah,
it's maybe getting back in touch with past clients as well that I've done work with. That's
and just have some great questions to ask them.
Yeah.
What do you consider great questions?
Good question.
Yeah.
I think if I'm talking to someone senior in the business, I want to change in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Have you lost me?
No, well, you're back.
No, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, okay. So I just think it's about, sort of asking them about themselves. What's your journey? How did you get into this role? Why did you decide to make this decision? Just get people talking about themselves. And I think it's a great way of doing it. But prepare for it. Do your due diligence on the conversation, or perhaps you may bump into someone when you go into a company, and I always think, there's a good opportunity to ask them that question. And just be that person that asks them a really good question. They go, oh, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about that. And it just sets off the conversation. But we don't want to be doing the talking. We want to be doing the facilitating of the conversation. So I'm just going to leave that there. I'm just going to very quickly summarize, and then we can just discuss if appropriate afterwards. So just those three key things to think about is how we're going to stay with value. Just to create that bit of reflection. What's gone well, and what have you learned about yourself this year? Always be learning. The future. So what next? Again, go and pick other people's in terms of what's their business going to look like, what's my business going to look like, and how we're going to win business, and just keep picking people's brains and thinking about the future. But we need to reflect on it ourselves. Am I up to date? Am I relevant? Am I of value? So it's okay having all these years of experience that most of us have got, which is great, but companies are interested in what value we can bring to them in the future. And think about who can help you and who can you help, and just think about having more improved and better conversations. So in a nutshell, create that thinking and reflection time. And there we are.
Brilliant. Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Very good.
One of the things that has struck me all the way through this is, for me, what you've described is one of the reasons why this group exists. And without being eloquent enough to explain that, working through your logic, every time I'm thinking, that's why I like the people on this call. That's why we don't open up this group to everybody. It's people who think like us, because we are able to share thoughts and ideas and challenges, and not necessarily in a structured, oh, I've got a problem, who can help, but it comes out in the conversation. And part of the reason that the structure is the way it is we have people like you along to share your experience and your thoughts and a fresh perspective, but we also have a spotlight on an internal, a member, and that's the opportunity to really understand what their journey was, what they've experienced along the way, and that's a story that prompts a lot of the questions that I think you're encouraging us to ask, is to say, but why did you do that at that point?
Yeah.
What made you jump from the military to finance? What made you jump from heading a large corporate organization to being on your own? What made you choose to work with a business partner, or what made you choose to work on your own? And I think those conversations come out, for me anyway, they come out very naturally in our discussions, and they're the most helpful for me.
Yeah, I think it's like not quite a problem shared as a problem halved, but it is good to get stuff out there. And sometimes when you're fishing in the pool of experience, so there'll be a revelation that'll come up.
Yeah.
Catch it, and someone will go, have you thought about doing this? Or
Yeah.
what about, and that's the beauty of these sort of networking groups, or this one in particular. We can go out for a drink, we can go out for breakfast, we can do whatever, we can just have a chat. And sometimes little nuggets just pop up, which is great. It's the idea of it, particularly being stuck in a house while the sun is shining.
Yeah. But we all do very different things, but we all have a common experience as well. We're all running a business, with the exception of James, who had to leave us earlier on. I don't know if you saw his note, but he said thank you very much. He had a client on a call, and the shared experiences of running a business, whether it's the accounting or the social media side that you mentioned, or the marketing or alternative ways to do it, I think are the nuggets that Pete was talking about that come out. We had quite a lot of discussion on social media through the course of this year, a discussion about social media through the course of the year and how it changes, and events like the Twitter activity trigger other things, and we all at various stages in the journey make decisions based on those discussions that says, for my case, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to Google and a lot less attention to anything else. In fact, just to be kept accountable, since we last spoke, I have cancelled the Vividly Simple Twitter account. I have cancelled the Vividly Simple Instagram account, and the Facebook page. And I'm just doing a combination of LinkedIn and Google stuff. And it actually feels much more manageable. The Google stuff's brilliant because I'm reusing a lot of the LinkedIn stuff that was from this time last year and is still relevant. And it's a much easier thing for me to focus on than having all these old accounts lying around thinking, oh, should I be doing something? It was really difficult, actually. It was really difficult to press that delete button because you keep thinking, yeah, but what if?
That's FOMO, isn't it? Fear of missing out. Yeah. Just a quick one there, Andy. Did we decide who was the Google My Business Expert or is that another one for Phil?
Well, no, we have a variety.
Okay.
So Andrew has a lot of knowledge. He
good.
a lot of that with James, and James has quite a bit of experience now. James Knight.
Yeah.
And I've been through it recently.
Oh, okay, cool.
Depends what you want to know, Sheila. I mean, I know the basics. If it's anything too ridiculous.
So I set mine up a couple of years ago, but I understand there's been some changes. So I just want to really understand that what I need to change and that I'm utilising it in the right way. So if you wouldn't mind having a quick chat with me, Andrew, at some stage, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think for me, the thing I've done this year, which is helping me, is writing stuff down. So the intention was it was a journal, but it's not. It's a cross between a journal and a diary. So I write every day. Some of the topics that David mentions today. Some of it's just, this is what I did today. These are the ideas I did today. How was my day? Did it work? Did it not work? And then just by writing down, you start to identify and answer some of the questions that David mentioned naturally.
Does anyone else do a journal?
Not recently.
No.
I've done it. So I started, when did I start? 27th of June this year. And I've basically nearly just finished. I've got about 3 pages left and 1 page left. And
so I
almost every day. There's a couple of days where I've been away or something, but I've pretty much done it every day. I
don't get it. I get it. I get how it is brilliant for some people. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dismissing it. But for me, all I ever do is I think back to when I was at school and we were encouraged to make copious notes about everything that you were being taught. And I never went back and read any of them.
Yeah, but it's not.
That doesn't mean you didn't learn anything from them.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily about going back. I mean, I am going to go back because it's the end of the year, but to me, it's about, you start to identify things in your head naturally by writing it down.
Yeah. So I write a lot. You know, I've always got a notebook, an old-fashioned notebook, and I've got a stack of these. You know, the screen's not big enough, but it's much taller than that, because I always write down what it is I've got to do, the outcomes. No, scribbles. It's an aid memoir, really. But I do filter into that. I write down things like focus more on customers, focus more on our existing customers. So I understand the value of actually, you know, the mental retention value of physically writing something into a book. But the journaling, particularly the people who are full on into journaling, who write, you know, spend time every day to set time aside to write what they did in the day, what went well, how they felt, all of this stuff. I can't really get it.
No, I mean, mine is basically doing what you do, but take out the day-to-day stuff like, what am I doing today? So I have a notepad, which is like the work I'm going to do after I finish this meeting.
Yeah.
That's my sort of to-do list. But in my journal, it's a little bit more, I might reflect on what I've done today, what went well, you know, why a particular project or a particular issue I solved well, and how can I use that to go forwards.
And I don't, without wishing to pry or ask for any examples, but do you combine it with your sort of own, your personal feelings as well as your work activity, or is it very much a work thing?
It's mainly work.
Yeah.
Because it's to me, because, you know, it depends on the different people in the group, but, you know, I'm on my own. I sit in this room 8-10 hours a day. I interact with my partner occasionally, but, you know, I just sometimes need to empty my head.
Yeah.
And I'd say some of the questions that David's posed today, you can see trends in what you're doing. And when you write something down, and if you're writing it down for the 5th time, you're like, okay, I recognize, even without going back through the book, you're recognizing what you've done just by the fact that you're just constantly writing it down every day, that, you know, I'm struggling with X. Okay, well, I've struggled with X 4 or 5 times now. What do I need to do to make sure I'm not struggling with X anymore?
Yeah.
Really interesting. Yeah.
Another thing, I'm not going to be able to remember the proper name for it, but there's lots of people practice gratitude, and they do something regularly at a regular time each day. Can anyone prompt me on what it's called? Where you positive.
Set an intention, or
It's just practicing gratitude, isn't it?
Yeah, there's another word for it as well, but while I think of it, I'm just going to switch the recording off. If